here. Okay, so let's get started. As I mentioned, I'm Linda, owner of Peak Travel, and tonight I cannot tell you how happy and proud I am to have a all-star lineup of speakers from Quark Expeditions. And when they talk and share their stories, I hope and I am confident you will agree. Can you hear me and see me, guys, still?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Tonight's focus is on expedition cruising to see the polar bears and the penguins. So if you know what that means, you know that we are talking about the polar regions, meaning the Arctic, the high north Arctic, and the Antarctica, which is in the south. So hopefully you will be educated and learn a lot about what's possible and travel to those regions of the world. And our partners at Quark, who I will introduce here shortly, will give us tons of information that we know or that you can follow along with and learn about. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I just want to remind you, we are keeping you muted and your video off if you don't mind, because we just want to be respectful to the speakers and to our attendees who are on so that they get the most out of the experience. We do love to use the chat function. So if you aren't familiar, change the setting to everyone when you go into that chat function on the bottom. That way everybody can see your comments and we can build upon each other's comments or questions, and everybody can see you. Also, to be best at viewing, we suggest that you do the speaker view. So if you go up in your upper right hand corner where you see view, speaker view means basically that you will see whoever is speaking and their slides. And tonight we are going to share, we're having 3 or 4 different people share because we're all going to be telling different stories. So this will be really important for you because some of the videos and photography that you're going to see tonight are amazing. So please use that functionality when you can, and that would be super appreciated. So tonight, what are we going to talk about? First, I'm just going to open with a couple slides. Everybody's always asking, even though we're done talking about COVID, we can't be done quite yet, right? We're close, so let's get across the finish line. I heard somebody say, don't spike the ball on the 5-yard line. We're so close. But with travel, you've probably seen in the news, there's been a lot of evolution with vaccinations in the US and other countries following along. I want to go over some notable country openings and what progress we've been made just very quickly, because tonight is all about the inspiration that we're bringing you, and that is courtesy of our friends at Quark Expeditions. So we'll talk a lot about the high Arctic, Svalbard, which is part of Norway up in the high Arctic, and Greenland, and what some of those experiences are going to look like. And then we're going to go down to Antarctica, not just to the Antarctica Peninsula, but to the Falkland Islands, King George Island, and some of the iconic places that you may see or hear about there. Then I'm not really doing a poll, but a little bit of chat at the end, because be prepared. I'm going to ask you something that you learned or something that's maybe surprised you about these regions of our beautiful planet, and want to kind of get the chat going. And then, of course, as always, we will finish with a Q&A. So again, chat function is critical. Between Aaron, Jess, and I will be monitoring those, and we'll come back to them at the end. Okay, so just a couple quick things before we get into Quark and the polar bears and the penguins. It has been nice to see progress. I'm sure you guys feel this as well, but just a couple headlines that have even hit the media in the last few days is TSA the other day hit over almost 2 million travelers at the airports in the US since pre-pandemic. So it's nice to, we obviously have a ways to go, but it's nice to see the progress and people are traveling and feel safer. And there's more places for us to be able to visit, which is of course a key thing. And a poll recently done by one of the travel publications said that 77% of Americans who were polled in this survey said they plan to travel this summer. Some of that might be domestic, some might be international, but for us, it's just great to see people being able to get back out there. And then, of course, for whatever reason, just because Europe is so much a part of where Americans love to travel, and it is such a big destination for us and the world, is we always kind of look to Europe for kind of the the pulse on what's going on. So it is nice to see the EU kind of give permission to its countries to start proposing easing the travel restrictions. And we have seen country by country kind of starting to announce what those might mean. So where have been people going? Just real briefly, of course, coming off in Minnesota, coming off our winter season, Cabo up in that upper left, Mexico has been a popular destination. Hawaii has been really great. It is part of the US, of course, which means you don't have to test to get back into the continental. So that's been a big draw for people. The Caribbean in general has been very popular, and with negative COVID testing, proof of a negative test, that obviously makes it pretty friendly to get to. And in Central America, Belize, Costa Rica, and some of those countries have also been open. So that really has made it nice. And then, of course, the following two photos are national parks and Alaska. Very popular, very, whether it's for summer or fall, clearly helping a lot of clients with all of these regions throughout. So what is up with Europe? What is open and opening soon? And I can tell you the kind of the three photos to the left: Iceland, Greece, and Croatia they have now been open to us. Croatia has been pretty open to us almost this entire time. So again, with negative COVID test, and they are all evaluating a vaccine passport, and will they allow vaccinated travelers to come in without a test? So that will all be kind of shaken out in the coming weeks. But also France and Denmark, Portugal, they have all recently made announcements that they are starting to ease their restrictions. And we anticipate seeing more and more almost every day. And sometimes they start by letting other EU travelers in. But for us, that's a good step. Any progress is a good step, because in our mind, let them kind of shake it out. Make sure the restaurants are open. Make sure the locals are feeling comfortable. Because if you've heard us speak before, you know that we believe if it's not a great time to go to those places because you can't experience it like you should and that you deserve to, then maybe we pause it. So let them shake that out. I think let them call back their employees, get their systems back in order, and then it'll be a great time for us to go. So I just suggest, if you have a specific destination or want to brainstorm for summer, fall, and beyond, just to ask one of our travel advisors, or email me, and I can hook you up. Cruises are also open. So you've probably been seeing that some are open this summer, some are open right now or very soon to be. Caribbean, Greece, and some parts of the Mediterranean, but primarily in the Greek Isles. And then, of course, Alaska. We do love our small ships on all of these, the small to mid ships. So those do tend to perform better in times of like that we're facing. So it just kind of stands true to how we love to send you guys traveling. So again, if you have a curiosity about where you can go with cruising, the other thing is keep in mind that 2022 and beyond is already filling up on some of these smaller ships. So if you think you're going to cruise next year or into 23, please let's start that discussion sooner than later if we can, just so that you have your top choices. And then, of course, I have to, before I transition over to Quark, I have to make this announcement because everyone is always asking about Italy. As you know, they got hit quite hard, but they are doing some dedicated flights. Delta in particular has a few where they are going to test before you get on the flight. So everybody who is on that flight tested negative, and they know that they can safely send you. So again, we work with our partners to make sure that experience on the ground is what it should be, but they are so ready for us to come. So that was great news when that hit us. All right, so tonight we are here to talk about the Arctic and Antarctica, and it is such my pleasure, you have no idea, to talk about these regions. So first, I would love to hear, before I get our speakers on, I would love to hear who is interested in going, I'm sorry about that, in going to these regions? Is it on your bucket list? Have you been? Tell me a little bit about that, and curious to see, you know, who's been, or if it's something that you're fascinated about, and that's why, you know, why you're here tonight to learn more. But tell us, have you been to the Arctic or Antarctica, or is it on your bucket list? And let's see what people say. While we're waiting for people to kind of weigh in on that, I'm going to start to introduce our guest speakers, and we'll come back to that. I have been very, very fortunate to travel with Quark 3 times, and 2, as you can see by the left-hand photos, are with my lovely family of 4, Andrew and Abby and my husband, Jim. So the top one is in the Arctic. We did the Svalbard journey that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And then we did the 7th continent, which is sometimes why it is on people's bucket list. In Antarctica, at the bottom, you can see Jim and the kids. I don't know how I got behind the camera and didn't get in that. And then I had a really unique experience taking a group of 14 literally to the North Pole, 90 degrees. And Solon, who is one of our speakers tonight, was our expedition leader. That ship in the background is literally a nuclear-powered Russian ice-breaking ship. Fascinating story. We're not going to talk much about the North Pole tonight. I know there's a couple clients on tonight that were with me on that journey. So if you have questions specifically about it, let me know, but we are going to focus on a little bit more of the mainstream trips. And just wanted to let you know that on the chat, we are seeing a lot of people saying that both or one of these are definitely on their bucket list. Really want to see the polar bear. Somebody said, I see one of our clients who has been to Svalbard and now would like to go to Antarctica. That's awesome. And somebody who is Antarctica and it's on your list for 2022. That's great. Good to see a lot of people have this on their bucket list. So hopefully tonight you'll walk away with a lot of education and knowledge of these destinations and what to expect. Okay, it is my pleasure, as I've said, to introduce our speakers tonight. I mentioned that we have an all-star. This is not common. Let me just say that, first of all, that these 3 people would carve out time at the same time to be with us, and that it all works within their schedules. So tonight we are going to start with Alex McNeil, who is the head of Expedition Experiences. So he'll tell you a little bit about that, and he's going to talk about the Arctic. And then Solon Jensen, who is an expedition leader in both regions. They reposition the ship in between seasons, and Solon is often on both of them. He is going to talk about Antarctica. And then Kara Matthew is a dear friend to Peak. She is kind of our go-to person, has been on many, many, many of these sailings, and is our person who she helps with a lot of the agency development and education so that we stay up on what's active in the polar regions. So Alex, I am going to stop my share and ask you to share your screen, and let's get started.
Can you see my screen there?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. I just saw, I think my favorite comment I'd ever seen in one of these, which was, I'm only 10 years old. I can't go, I'm too young. But you are old enough to go. You just have to convince your parents to bring you. But thanks for being here tonight. My name's Alex. I'm the Director of Expedition Experience and Innovation at Quark. I was born in the UK, raised in Canada, and I've lived in Australia and Mexico and worked in Argentina and Russia and many places. So I kind of consider myself a bit of a global citizen. Since 2007, I've spent over 1,500 days exploring the Arctic and the Antarctic, first as a guide, then a boat mechanic, that was fun, then a history lecturer, and expedition leader. And my current role is kind of dreaming up new trips, and I draw on a lot of the exploration, the time that I've spent in the field to do that. So it's a really exciting time for polar travel. And I'm honored to be here to share a few of my favorite tales from the Arctic, which highlights some of the incredible destinations that we travel to. So I'm going to start off in a place called Svalbard, which is part of Norway. It's a few hundred miles north of the Norwegian coast. just highlighted there. And this is one of the wildlife hotspots of the Arctic. It's well above the Arctic Circle. In the summer, you get 24-hour sunlight, and June and July in particular are great months to travel there. Here's a bit of a zoomed in map of the archipelago. The area that you access Svalbard through is called Longyearbyen. It's a small settlement. Actually, it was a mining settlement for many years, and often a lot of the flights come directly from Oslo. So it's really accessible, and it's a small, compact destination that packs a big punch. You can circumnavigate the whole archipelago. I mean, if you didn't stop, you could probably do it in 4 days, but a lot of our trips are kind of around the 10-day mark, and you can just get so much into that time period. The story I wanted to share with you tonight is from 2008. So I was a young guide, kind of in my very early stages. I think this was my second Arctic season, and I was just immersed in the experience-focused culture at Quark. There's a spirit amongst the guide team of always trying to spot wildlife and maximize the off-ship experiences for guests in any way. And it's kind of like competitive spirit in a lot of senses. And that was probably how you would have seen me most of the time, with binoculars, in my hands, glued to my face. And that time of year in Svalbard in July, the wildlife is just, going crazy, feeding on all the biological productivity that the summer months bring. By this time, the sea ice is also receded, so you have a lot of kind of freedom of navigation on the ships. And my story involves one of our guests who was traveling with us. Her name was Judy, and she was from Montana. She was a retired teacher, and she was kind of like a free spirit. I guess I've never actually been to Montana, but I imagine a lot of people from Montana are a bit free-spirited. She came to this trip with no expectations. She was just keen to experience everything as it came along, which I must say is a perfect attitude for expedition travel. It's very much an opportunistic travel experience. We as expedition guides and as expedition leaders will see opportunities in the weather and the landscape with the wildlife and completely pivot from what our plans might have been 6, 12, 24 hours earlier. So through that kind of approach to travel, you're really able to make the most of the destination. And Quark I'm super honored to work with such a talented set of individuals, and the depth of experience that the Quark teams have, having been doing expedition cruising, offered more trips than any other company. We've been doing this for 30 years, and that really shows in the experiences that we provide. So we'd been in Svalbard at this point with Judy and doing this trip for 4 days. And in that short amount of time, we'd already seen so much. In the first few days, she'd been able to get up close and personal with a Svalbard reindeer. She'd been able to visit some of the historical sites and really get a feeling for what it might have been like to be one of the early explorers. The shorelines of Svalbard are dotted with these old, trapping cabins, sometimes from like the 17 or 1800s. And because of the dryness of the atmosphere, these are really well preserved. So you can go there and almost feel like you're stepping back into history. We'd also been able to visit a walrus haul out on shore, and even hike to within a few dozen meters of a large group, just laying in the sun. And it's really amazing just to sit there and watch, these huge animals just kind of basking in the sunlight, rolling over, communicating with each other. And that was a highlight for sure. We were also lucky enough to see walrus on sea ice, which is a completely different experience. The animals can be much more alert when on sea ice. The ice is moving slowly. We're able to shut down the engine, so it's almost complete silence, and you're hearing every grunt and groan, and their skin rubbing up against the ice. And that was a really incredible experience that we shared too. We'd also visited one of Svalbard's bird cliffs, and this in itself is a majestic experience. It makes you feel how alive this place is in the summer months, with the nutrient-rich waters, and when they're at their kind of highest levels of productivity. And one of the things that always overwhelms me in a positive way about visiting bird cliffs like this is just the sound. It's like a huge like tornado-esque roar, and you realize it's all these birds calling to each other in unison. And one of the things that blows my mind is that amongst all that chaos, amongst all of the cacophony of sound that's coming, an individual bird can pick up the call of its partner or its chick from hundreds of meters away, which is something that just blows me away every time. We'd also been able to find a group of curious fox pups that were there in their summer coat and get nice and close, and they were super curious as well, pouncing around the tundra. I've been able to get to know Judy really well because in the Arctic we do a lot of hiking. So this is a typical outing in Svalbard where we break up into groups. Sometimes the hiking groups can be 10, 15 people to one guide. And for some reason, Judy and I, over those first 4 days, had really aligned, and we'd spent a lot of time together in our medium fast hiking group. We give the option for people to choose whatever speed they're most comfortable with. We have a contemplative group that kind of stays nearby the beach or the landing site. We have a medium group, which goes a little bit further, and then you just get on and on till our charging group, which are the really ambitious hikers. So we've been able to explore the tundra and got to know each other. And one of the big features of Svalbard is the sea ice environment. It changes seasonally. So in winter, this archipelago is pretty much entirely encased in sea ice, except for the southwestern coast of the main island there, Spitsbergen. And that change represents an opportunity for the creatures that use that platform as their habitat. And as the summer months progress, the ice recedes from the coastline, allowing our ships and zodiacs to be able to access the landing sites that we visit. And so by day 4, we've been around the northern part of the archipelago, and we're just coming through the Henlopen Strait, which is where the arrow ends there. And our expedition leader decided to change our focus. We'd been doing these great landings and zodiac cruises and hikes, and he said that now we're going to go north and sail, for a few hours north to the ice edge and try and spot our first polar bear. And I remember Judy's reaction. She was so immersed in everything that had been going on, and as I said, came with no expectations, that she'd completely forgot about polar bears. And so I shared dinner with her and watched as her excitement about the prospect of this new chapter of her adventure built. Now, I mentioned the spirit of the guides at Quark, and one of the things we focus on is this like relentless pursuit to outdo one another, and that the best manifestation of that is spotting wildlife. When we're on the sea ice edge, which is the best habitat to spot polar bears, often guides will skip meals, they'll stay up 24 hours a day. Sometimes our expedition leader, if there's a really good bear experience, would make an announcement.
Oh, Alex, we're losing you a little bit here. Oh, I think you're back. I know Alex.
3 a.m. and say, look, and the moment to have the party. I'll keep on talking. Do you want me to turn off my video maybe to help?
Sure. Yep. Now we can hear you fine.
I've just turned off my video. Interrupt me again if I keep.
Okay, you're good. All right, Alex, we're having a little bit of a hard time here hearing you. I know he was saying, Solon, I might ask you to jump in here verbally to talk about it, and we'll keep trying with Alex. But I know he was saying that if they're opportunistic and somebody is up late to see polar bear at 3 a.m, they will make an announcement over the PA so that anybody who does want to get up can to go see them. Alex, are you there? Okay.
I might be back now.
You're back and we can't see your screen.
Hold on a moment. I'll share now. Apologies for that.
No worries. Sorry, everybody. I think in this Zoom world, we're kind of all somewhat used to this, but sorry for it. All right, Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for your
Okay.
patience.
Yep, go for it. We can see your slides.
So yeah, the ice is completely broken, and it's really hard to pick out that the subtle movement of a bear crossing the ice. But when you do, it's like one of the most thrilling experiences you can have as a guide. It's a total adrenaline rush. So we arrived at the ice edge just as the day turned to twilight. It was still kind of 24-hour sunlight, but the sun would just crest across the horizon at this point. And there were some clouds in the sky, which made spotting quite difficult. But then something in the distance caught my eye. A little nose lifted its head above a piece of ice. It was just over a kilometer away. And after 5 minutes of watching closely, because you don't want to be the one to, well, let's say, cry wolf, where you say, oh, there's a bear, and everyone gets excited. And then it turns out to be a yellow piece of ice or something. But after 5 minutes, I figured it was a bear, and I called the expedition leader to let him know. Soon the ship was changing course and moving slowly through the ice towards the bear. And you never know in these situations how it's going to play out. The bear could not be interested. We don't chase the bear, or it could be completely curious, you know. So I left my position on the upper deck and headed down to the bow deck. And it turned out to be just an exceptional experience. It was a female bear without cubs, and she was very, very curious of the ship and came like really, really, really close. And as we were kind of watching, we noticed that behind her there was some blood on the ice, which means she probably had just eaten, and was probably also contributing to why she was so relaxed. You know, in the summer months, polar bears are so focused on fattening up, on hunting the seals that they eat. And so the captain navigated us to the perfect position, stopped the ship. It was super quiet. The bear appeared completely relaxed and at ease. And after about 30 minutes, many people started to go back inside the ship. And soon it was just Judy and I standing on the deck, and this bear, this female bear. And here's a picture of Judy's head. And there was something that was so intimate about that experience. You know, we were just three souls out in the middle of nowhere. We felt that we could almost like feel the bear's spirit. It was kind of looking up at the ship, looking down and just wandering around. And we were thinking, you know, what's on this bear's mind? What had her life been like? It was a strange and really powerful experience. Judy turned to me and said that she would remember this bear for the rest of her life, and that she felt that their souls had connected out there. I felt the same way. And while I've seen, you know, hundreds of bears and had some amazing experience with polar bears, this one has always stood out to me. There are a few different ways to see bears, but to me, the sea ice environment is the best way above all. This is where bears are in their prime habitat. This is what polar bears were designed. This is where they were designed to exist. So you can go to Churchill and see bears in a tundra buggy where they're kind of waiting and they're kind of fasting. But the sea ice environment, there's just something magical about it. There's something, I guess, perfect about seeing such a majestic animal in the place that it's supposed to be, in its preferred habitat. After that experience, you know, we stayed in the ice all through the next day, and in total, from that point on, we ended up seeing 15 different bears on that trip. On the sea ice, some from land when we were cruising the Zodiacs. And, you know, seeing a bear is a magic part of many Quark Arctic voyages, and especially in Svalbard. It's an incredible destination for these kind of experiences. And it's important to say that on expeditions, nothing's guaranteed, but on Svalbard voyages in particular, bears are always a focus of each trip. So that's my Svalbard story. Now I want to take you to Greenland, one of the largest islands in the world and a real polar paradise. We offer trips that focus on Greenland alone, and also trips that include Svalbard and Greenland in the same voyage. You may have heard of Greenland recently. The former president's aide suggested that he was interested in buying it. And as crazy as that may sound, and regardless of whatever your political opinions might be, frankly, if it were for sale, it would be a great piece of property to buy. And I think that no fewer than 4 other presidential administrations have contemplated buying it over the past century and a half. Greenland is beautiful, and it's by far my favorite destination in the Arctic. But to be clear, it's not for sale. Now, I must confess, I'm a Greenland fanatic. In fact, I often do a whole presentation on why people should travel to Greenland, but I'm not going to do that today. Today, I want to focus on a more personal story. So I'm not going to tell you how kind and hospitable the Greenlandic people are, or how on every trip we visit local communities and lead the industry in proactive engagement with settlements. I'm not going to tell you about how vibrant the arts and culture scene is in Greenland and the amazing crafts that you can find there. I'm not going to tell you about how beautiful the Greenlandic language is. I'm not going to tell you how tourism is actually a key part to the development of a sustainable economy in Greenland. As an alternative to a more resource focused economy. I'm not going to tell you how exclusive Greenland is and how it's like Iceland, which is very nearby, very comparable, but 1,000 times more exclusive, and with only a fraction of the visitors going there. I'm not going to tell you how the beautiful ice forms are there and how it's kind of the iceberg factory of the Northern Hemisphere. I'm definitely not going to say anything about the wildlife you can see there, or about the natural wonders you can find there, like the Northern Lights in the later season trips. I'm going to tell you a story from 2016. By this stage, I was the expedition leader, and the story I want to share is about an experience that I had with two of our guests, CK and Mariana, in a place called Scoresby Sund in East Greenland. Scoresby Sund is one of the longest fjord systems in the world, with some of its arms stretching over 300 kilometers inland from the main entrance to the fjord there. Deep in the fjord system, there's a place called Rode Fjord, which means red fjord, where the Greenland ice sheet pours ice into the ocean through the many outlet glaciers that discharge into that fjord. Rode Fjord, called Red Fjord, is so named because of these spectacular red colorings on the hillside. It's due to oxidized iron particles. And this area is not only like visually stunning, it's also renowned for having many, many periods in the late summer of amazing weather. Great time to travel to Scoresby Sund is August, September, and you get these high pressure systems that come down from the Greenland ice sheet and create these perfect bluebird days. It's also a hiker's paradise. By this stage, I'd been into Rode Fjord more than a dozen times. And there was always this one peninsula that stood out to me, and it was called Langenæs. There was just something about it. It had a great high point that looked over one of the largest glaciers in the fjord, and it was in a location where you could get the best 360-degree views of the fjord. The only problem is, you can see by this picture, that there was always too much ice around to get there by Zodiac. And even if you could, the topography was so steep, it would have taken hours of arduous hiking to get to the viewpoint. Often the ice is so dense in Rode Fjord that you can't even make it all the way through. And as we were entering the fjord, I was on the bridge with the captain and his officers, because on our Quark trips, you're able to go on to the navigation bridge and see the captain and the crew navigating the ship in these incredible destinations. And CK and Mariana were by my side, and we were just watching them demonstrate their incredible navigational talents. We were in the corner of the bridge watching as they were super focused as the captain weaved his way through the icebergs deeper and deeper into the fjord, wondering how far we would actually get. And eventually we made it deep enough to see the peninsula, but as usual, the ice was way too thick to launch Zodiacs. But this time was different. I was on a ship with helicopters, and Quark has been operating helicopters in the Arctic and Antarctic for 30 years. And we know the best way to use these incredible machines. So we were able to land the helicopters just 100 meters, from this incredible viewpoint. And we're overlooking this massive glacier. It was so active, you can see the ice there in the bay, and it was just cracking, crashing every 10 minutes or so. Shortly after the operation started, I managed to make it up to the viewpoint and found CK and Mariana just sitting there looking out over this view. And they were so amazed, and they were enjoying every moment there in the sun, just watching the glacier. And after a few moments of sitting there, they looked at me and said, "Alex, this is incredible, but there's only one thing that can make this breathtaking experience even better." And I was, okay, well, what do you have in mind? And I said, you know, if on the way back to the ship, we could fly over this glacier and explore it by air, that would be fantastic. And in the true nature of expedition spirit, I said, okay, great idea, done, let's go. And so I asked the helicopter pilots to take all of the guests on their way back to the ship on this scenic flight over the glacier. And it just put a whole new perspective. You can see the ship there in the top left corner. And there was this like deep blue. I think someone described it as like a fountain pen ink reservoir. It's just like an outer worldly color. This isn't an edited photograph. This is actually what that melt pool looked like. And it was honestly one of the best days of my life. And the atmosphere on board that ship was euphoric. It's hard to describe that feeling of sharing something incredible together and then being back on board a ship. It's just one of the most special elements of expedition cruising to me. The next morning we woke up in Rode Fjord, and to top it all off, I organized a sunrise hike on Rhode Island, where a small group of us just made it to this viewpoint and looked out over these beautiful red cliff faces and this iceberg graveyard of icebergs just trapped in a small bay there. So I hope that gives you a taste of what an incredible place Greenland is. I hope you get to experience it at some point in your lives. And it's been a pleasure talking to you about it today. And I'm going to pass over to my friend Solon, who I actually met in 2008 in the Canadian Arctic. And when I met Solon, he was sitting in his cabin drinking a glass of whiskey with the talk show host Billy Connolly, the Scottish talk show host. And they were having a banjo war with each other, trying to outdo each other on the banjo. And I thought, man, this is one crazy character. He only had a short beard then. It's grown a few inches since. And I've spent probably more time exploring the polar regions with Solon than anyone else. And so it's great to be sharing this event with him. Over to you.
Nice. Thank you, Alex. And I'll share my screen here. Thank you, Linda and Peak Travel. And let's see here. And I'd also like to send a shout out to Quark Expeditions. I've worked in the polar regions since 2003, born and raised in Alaska. And I appreciate, as an independent contractor, that Quark chooses to maintain and support the expedition vision, which Alex has talked about in his presentation just now, and which for me is that by which we can most fully experience these extreme places. And the expedition vision to me, or the expedition mentality, is about flexibility and, as Alex mentioned, opportunism. And it's in contrast to schedule and plans. And it means that you have to be specialized, but also extremely flexible and nimble. And so thank you, Quark, for continuing to prioritize that as we move forward together. Casting our geographic awareness to the south here, and of course, this is planet Earth. And we have South America there at the top and the continent of Antarctica at the bottom there. You can see Antarctica surrounded by the Southern Ocean, which is an extremely important geographical barrier, a climatic barrier, a biological boundary, and over the last 135 million years has helped allow Antarctica to get cold and stay cold. Our area of focus as we visit Antarctica is the Antarctic Peninsula region and the peripheral Antarctic islands, especially the island of South Georgia and Falkland Islands. And for me, this was my introduction to Antarctica. And again, just to introduce myself, my name is Solon Jensen, and I've been an expedition leader and guide in this part of the world for coming on 18 years now. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a meditation on just the process of arriving in Antarctica via Falkland Islands and the island of South Georgia. And I'll reflect a little bit on what it's like to be an expedition leader and guide in this context, and finish with a story about my first visit down to the peninsula. Just to orient yet again, the southern tip of South America is our port of call and the center point for leaving for this area in the Southern Ocean. And then, of course, Falkland Islands, Isla Malvinas, the island of South Georgia, further to the east and south, and then down to the Antarctic Peninsula. And this is really the area of focus that we look at when we're traveling to the Antarctic. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you. No problem.
Great. My screen's just frozen, so stand by one.
Mm.
We each get different complications, so
Indeed.
there's that expedition spirit that'll carry us through.
I, in fact, can't even access my cursor. Curious. I'll see if I can escape out of this. Or Linda, perhaps you can grab the screen back and I can try again.
Yes. Or stop your share and then reshare again. Try that.
Do you want me to take it from you, Solon?
Yeah, Alex, why don't you give it a try?
There. So does that jump it out for you?
Nope,
Are you-
not yet.
If you're doing, are you doing the right and or the down arrow, Solon?
Yeah, those are the arrows I was using to advance my slides here. I'll give it one more try. How about that?
So for everybody
Thank you,
who's
guys.
on, we were Kara and Alex and Solon and I were on early, and we tested and we did everything, and we thought we were all that because it worked so easily. And now here we are. So sorry about that. Here we go, Solon. Thank you. Take it away.
Yeah, cheers, guys. And you can see here this slide we might return to later just shows the variety of itineraries that Quark Expeditions offers in this part of the world. Many different timings and times of season between November and March to visit, depending on how much time you have. But the itinerary I took on my first voyage down there, and probably love above all, is the long way, if you will, over to Falklands, the island of South Georgia, and then across the Scotia Sea and the Drake Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula. And I'll begin just with a few images from Falklands, followed by a few images of South Georgia and down to the Great Antarctic. This wind-beaten and ocean-beaten land is so exquisite. You can see down here also the tussock grass, which is some of the key habitat for what, for me, is one of the highlights of Falkland Islands and all of the peripheral Antarctic islands, which is the wildlife of the seabirds. And this is an image of black-browed albatross, which I took on my first voyage and love so much. There's so much attention and care in this image. The almost airbrushed black brows. And Falklands are the stronghold for black-browed albatross in the world. There's one colony that's estimated to be over 180,000 strong. And during the summer months, these guys return to Falklands to nest, care for eggs and chicks throughout their time. Another creature I love in Falklands are the Magellanic penguins. And this is a penguin species that burrows into the ground to nest. which is so curious relative to some of their cousins elsewhere in the Southern Ocean. And of course, you know, all of us who observe penguins can't help but anthropomorphize their bipedal stance and begin to almost imbue them with human characteristics. It's impossible not to, and as a result is an endlessly entertaining group to watch as we make our way through the Southern Ocean and a variety of penguin species. As I mentioned earlier, just about Quark's commitment to flexibility and opportunism as well, you know, for me as an expedition leader, the key objective after safe operations and environmentally sensitive and responsible operations is to get you into the environment as much as possible, because I have seen and have experienced myself that is the way to most meaningfully and fully absorb it and take it into our own experience, our own emotional natures, our own intellectual natures, and begin to make a relationship and continue our relationship with the natural world. And that's just one of the purposes, I think, that drives us continuously as we travel. Carrying on to the island of South Georgia, an indescribable place, almost Himalayan in character, cast far away from other land masses, and as a result can be extremely severe in its weather changes. Some days are like this, calm and clear with spectacular visibility, and some days are like this, where there are wind gusts of upwards of 100 knots and visibility is very slim. And so this is an example of a time when it doesn't matter if you have a plan or a schedule, because the environment will dictate what you can do and when. And the more flexible we are, the more we can utilize the moments and windows that we are given. So we created this term called opportunistic gratitude. We're grateful for the windows of opportunity that we have when they're there, and we jump at the chances, even if it's perhaps during a meal or an odd time of day, or demands a change of schedule in that regard. And of course, South Georgia is one of the strongholds of these beautiful, beautiful creatures, the king penguin. Incredible feeding grounds that it is. And wildlife are among the key, I think, touch points for the way that we relate to these places. Elephant seals, fur seals, an incredible array of other seabirds that utilize the tussock grass, which is in the background there, as their nesting habitat. And South Georgia has gone through some very impressive conservation mitigation measures to eradicate rats and some other non-native species to enhance the habitat for the small and large birds. And of course, this whole journey, you know, from South America through Falkland Islands, South Georgia to Antarctica is an area that any explorer going to or attempting to go to Antarctica also sailed. So the human history here is quite vast and deep. The history of exploration and also the history of exploitation. And here we have one of the whaling station remnants, Stromness whaling station on the island of South Georgia. And casting our gaze southward from South Georgia to the Antarctic. Again, as an expedition leader, I think the Antarctic, one of its most obvious and key impressions is the ice. And this is something I'm so grateful to be able to see and witness at this time in history. we have access to so much information, and I offer you this image here. So the Antarctic continent and ice shelves are outlined in white there. And this red color is indicating the winter extent of sea ice or frozen ocean, which occurs in the boreal winter. And if you take the land mass of Antarctica, you know, entirely covered in land ice, glacial ice, and the ice shelves that have been fed by that land ice, and then you include this sea ice extent, the Antarctic continent almost doubles in size, or the ice extent almost doubles in size. I mean, just absolutely incredible yearly transition. And you can see the Antarctic Peninsula on the left there. So as this ice extent in the wintertime begins to melt, it begins to show first freeing up that Antarctic Peninsula region. And that's when we can begin to explore it. And we have access to things like this, like a satellite image, which an expedition leader might use to decide with the captain where not to go, for example, or where perhaps to go. And herein we begin to adjust our plans on, you know, perhaps a weekly or daily scale. And as we get into the fjord systems themselves, begin to adjust our plans, perhaps even on an hourly scale. But incredible resources at hand to be able to maintain our flexibility as we go. Yeah, it just locked up again. I'm not sure what exactly happened here. Hold on 1 second.
So when the same thing happened to me, I think it's when someone else clicks, just see if you can click back away from Zoom. So your arrows aren't working.
Right.
But if you move your mouse and just try and click, even if you can't see your mouse because you're in presentation mode, and then try the arrows, see what happens. There you go.
Nice, thanks, Alex. So this is this is not my next slide, but that's all right. As we approach the Antarctic, the ice becomes, you know, one of the key features of what we're there to experience, and also what sometimes limits our ability to maneuver around there, as I was just saying. And some days are just incredible like this. We have our fleet of Zodiacs out and getting ready to go explore the glacial faces and the wildlife that's there, and everything really centers around the ice. Some days are like this, you know, you might say classically Antarctic, you know, blowing snow. You know, we choose a landing site, and then the penguins come to investigate us as the newcomers. And we aim to be out in almost any weather that we can safely operate in. And I feel it's really important to be able to experience those things. And these touch points, like being able to land on the continent and feel that connection to this entire place, move through the ice quietly. And here we begin to see this remarkable scale. I mean, almost an inconceivable scale of size and space relative to the human proportion. And the things that call this place home, the leopard seal here, one of the magnificent apex predators of the Antarctic marine environment, one of the distinctly Antarctic penguin species, the Adelie penguin as well. And you can see the ice and the scale. A few human beings just there on the horizon. And this is about 1.5 miles away from that ice face, across from this old moraine, which we've used to land on. I remember as we were leaving South Georgia for what was my first voyage and heading to Antarctica, one of the ornithologists on board, a gentleman named Jacques Serrois. He said, "Friends, we're heading into what may be arguably the world's largest art gallery." And of course, he was talking about the ice. And the ice is indescribable. Its moods, its shades, 1,000 textures, 1,000 shapes. It's almost lit from within. The way it's melting, the way it's balanced, and being able to be there and hear it crackling, hear it falling, hear total silence, and then a shatter or a pop. Indescribable. And sometimes the scale of the ice is so large, you think it's the land. You think it's a mountain that is encased in ice. Perhaps some of you have tracked what was for some time the largest iceberg floating around, A68A, from the Larsen C ice shelf that broke off a few years ago and was making its way north and into the Southern Ocean, and it has recently broken up into smaller chunks near the island of South Georgia. But these are some of the things that we go and seek out. So thank you for your time and that short meditation on the Antarctic Peninsula region and the island of South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. A very, very special place, difficult to describe with brevity, and just so much to experience and explore. Thank you. Thank you for your attention and time. I'll hand it over.
All right, Kara, you're on.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Solon. What's absolutely incredible, I'm just going to start my video here, is I'm still in a meditative state after hearing you, Solon, and Alex as well, and bringing us right to these beautiful, magical places. And I actually had the privilege and honor of meeting Solon for the first time in Antarctica in 2012. And I was with my 66-year-old aunt, my Aunt Lucy, who came along. And it's wonderful because, as you can see, with all these incredible experiences on and off the ship that Alex and Solon have been describing, we are really focusing on the off-ship experience. Even though we have an incredible on-board experience, we're really trying to go further and farther and get you into the heart of nature as much as possible in these remarkable destinations. You know, Cork Expeditions does offer the largest portfolio of off-ship adventure options, so it can be as adventurous and as active or as leisure as you would like your trip to be. So there are fun included activities. So if you don't choose anything else and do what's included in the regular program, there's so much to see and do in the Arctic and Antarctica when you're traveling on these small little expedition ships with Cork Expeditions. We have things like those hiking opportunities, those moderate walks or contemplative walks that Alex was talking about, or landing, helicopter landings, or sorry, heli flight sightseeing is included now with our new ship, the Ultramarine, which I'll talk about. But also the infamous polar plunge is included on all of our trips. And so I know that's a very memorable experience. And even if you don't participate, you have just as much fun watching all of the other guests jump into the polar waters. There's also photography programs. So if you're a photographer or if you are traveling with a like-minded photographer, we do have photography programs included on every single trip as well. And then don't forget to ask Peak Travel about our additional adventure options. So depending on the itinerary in the ship, I know that you saw a picture with Solon had pictures of the paddling excursion. We also have full sea kayaking. We have stand-up paddleboarding in Antarctica, depending on the itinerary and the ship. And then with Alex talking about Greenland, these innovative itineraries that Alex has helped create, we even have mountain biking and camping in Greenland as well. So lots to choose from to add on to your expedition. Quirk Expeditions does have 5 expedition ships, but I wanted to quickly mention our new Ultramarine. And with 3 decades of polar exploration, we do know the importance of choosing the right vessel for your trip. But the Ultramarine is gorgeous, and it really does bring tears to my eyes because we've been working on this ship for so long and she's brand new. And in Latin, the Ultramarine means beyond the sea. So this is our brand new purpose-built expedition vessel. And she just did her sea trials in Croatia a few weeks ago. And so this amazing little expedition vessel has 199 passengers, features 2 helicopter pads, 4 quick launching Zodiac embarkation points. So as you know, Solon and Alex were saying, being at really being inspired by nature and wanting to get out as quickly as possible if there is that opportunity. Because I know one evening in Antarctica, we saw 40 crab-eater seals gathering krill at sunset. And these quick launching Zodiac embarkation points are able to get those expedition leaders and expedition guides getting you out and off the ship faster. All of our cabins on the Ultramarine are all outside cabins, so you don't have to worried about that. We have balconies as well as solo cabins. So if you are a solo traveler and you might not be able to find anyone to go to Antarctica, or maybe you have some friends and you still want your solo cabin, there's those opportunities. But there's spas on board, there's a fitness center, gorgeous bistros and lounges. So this ship, even though you're in the heart of nature and going further and farther into these destinations, you can have all your creature comforts on board, and you don't need to sacrifice amazing cuisine with breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and wonderful snacks and beer and wines included with dinner. So there's so many amenities on board that you can come back to after exploring in the polar regions. So I just wanted to get you a little bit excited about some of our ships, especially the Ultramarine. And so I just wanted to give you a little sneak peek about our adventure options too. So definitely reach out to the Peak Travel team to find more about the Ultramarine and also about our adventure options. Thanks so much, Linda.
All right,
I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to grab the reins one last time. And thank you guys. And you guys, as for our guests who are on, please use the chat and start typing in some questions, or I would love to hear if you've learned anything specific or that you didn't know, maybe something that surprised you. And I am going to come back to a couple questions. But before I do, I just wanted to share something personal with you. First of all, I can't think you can see it, but I am actually wearing one of my Polar Plunge t-shirts. This one happens to be from the North Pole, but the 4 of us in our family all did the Polar Plunge, which is shocking, by the way, literally, in the Arctic and Antarctica. But I wanted to share with you this quick video. It's only 1 minute and 22 seconds or something like that, but this is the kind of stuff that you can't script. And this was one of those quick launches that we were taking an opportunity to see. Please make sure your volume is up if you can. These are orca or killer whales that we were observing, not zoomed in.
Oh my God. Bill. Oh my, right there. Oh my God. Oh my God. Just here. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Oh, 2. Jesus, just love the spray. Holy. Yeah, get some mullet placement in there, guys. Oh.
So if you have been on any of these adventures, you probably were just taken back to them because it really provokes something very powerful within you. And as the guys said, and Kara, I mean, the wildlife is ridiculous. What I was probably most surprised at is the land and the ice formations. I was not prepared to be as stunned and in awe of them as I was. So again, please use the chat. We're going to tell me what you learned, tell me what surprised you. We're going to come back to it, and please put some questions. So for the guys and for Kara, I want to ask you a couple questions that came up. Is there anything that you need to do to prepare? Maybe Alex, this might be a good one for you, that you would need to do to prepare for a trip like this?
I think there's some great books, like travel books that you can read. I think trying to wrap your, like, I wouldn't do a ton of research. I think it's better, like I was saying with the story with Judy, is she came with no expectations, and her, experience was just out of this world. Everything was new and exciting for her. So there's some like guidebooks, like Antarctic guidebooks or Arctic guidebooks. I'd avoid them. I'd definitely buy a pair of binoculars. It's a good thing that you can do, because sometimes the wildlife is farther away and then it approaches you, or you can just see different things. Those would be the main things that I'd recommend.
Anybody else, Kara or Solon, you want to add to that at all? I think one of the big things is you don't have to do anything. Like if you're thinking about training, or you saw hills and mountains and stuff, you're not necessarily climbing those. It's not like you're trekking Kilimanjaro or something to prepare. One thing I wanted to point out is in several of your photos, and a lot in my photos, you see people with their jackets off. Being in Toronto or Minnesota or in Alaska, as Solon is right now, we have colder weather here in the winter than we do, than they do in these regions. We were warm when we were hiking, and I say that lightly because, as Kara and these guys mentioned several times, is you can choose your pace, right? What else would you say about that, Solon?
Yeah, and I would just add that the high Arctic and Antarctica are definitely colder than anywhere in North America in their respective winter times. But in the summertime in Antarctica, it can be sometimes quite balmy, particularly with the radiant heat from the sun reflecting off the ice. And if there's no wind, you can feel quite comfortable. I think one thing to keep in mind, which we do remind people of as they're traveling in these areas, is that because it's so remote and the environments are so changeable and severe, that we need to be prepared for the worst weather, even if it's nice out. And we all the guides and all the leaders, we all have these stories of going out on a nice day and then it turns on you, and maybe you're there for a few hours longer than you anticipated because you need to wait for some better weather, or some ice moved in and made your passage a little bit slower than you anticipated. So I think coming with the binoculars front and center to get an intimate look at everything that's around, keeping your quality of observation out and curious above all, and following the packing list.
That's we do provide that with the help of Cork. We provide a lot of information ahead of time, like a packing list, because it is critical, because some of the things Cork provides on the ship that you don't have to, that are bulky, like everybody gets those yellow jackets, they're parkas with the puff jacket inside of them. It's excellent. I think, so one thing for you guys, Kara, Alex, and Solon, have you guys done the polar plunge? And maybe you've done it many, many times.
Yes, I definitely participated, and I was scared at first because I was thinking, should I really do this? And at the last minute, I thought, when am I ever going to do this again? And so really, sometimes the spirit can take over. And even though you might not be wanting to do it, pack your bathing suit, because you might just change your mind in Antarctica or in Greenland, in Herefjord on the east portion of Greenland. Just, expect the unexpected, because you might do the polar plunge. So pack your bathing suit.
Alex, have you done it? How many times? Alex is froze. Solon, you're up.
Yeah, the anticipation is the worst part.
It is.
And it's refreshing. and I find it a way to really connect with the environment.
That's a good call. All right, so thank you to everybody. Alex and Solon and Kara, I can't thank you enough. You've become dear friends of mine personally and of Peaks. So thank you for that. And for our guests on the call, please email me if you have questions, and Liz or I will take good care of you and help guide what is the best option for you in any of these regions. Somebody had made a comment that they didn't know that you could do this by a ship. It is the best way because you get to navigate and cover a lot more ground, or water in this case, because they sail at night. You wake up somewhere different. They get to go into the fjords where you wouldn't be in other ways. So this type of expedition sailing is really one of the best, in some cases, the only way to see it. So thank you for your time. Out of respect, we are a little bit over, but for those of you who want to stay on, there is another question or two that I would love to throw out. Maybe Solon, I'll kick this one to you, is talk about the Drake Passage. It is one of the questions that everybody brings up if you're going to Antarctica. Why don't you tell us about that?
A world-renowned body of water, approximately 900 kilometers or 600 miles from the protection of Tierra del Fuego in South America to the protection of the Antarctic Peninsula. And by protection, I merely mean land that you can sail amongst to be out of weather and ocean swell. And the Drake Passage is renowned for being very rough. And I would say, and I don't want to let anyone down by this, but I would say most of the time in the summertime when we're there, it is very much on the mellow side. The winter storms are the ones that are really, really intense. But that small space between the southern tip of South America and the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, that small space is where all of this energy, wind and current are funneling that as it circles around the Southern Ocean. So things can get quite bumpy there. I'd say two more things about the Drake Passage. One, being at open sea in the Southern Ocean is very special because so many seabirds use that as their habitat. All of these species of albatross, I mean, some of the largest birds in the world, like the wandering albatross, for example, use that intense weather, that wind, to glide for sometimes months at a time, sometimes even years without going to shore, and they feed at sea. And so to be able to witness these animals, these birds, is really, really exquisite. And lastly, I would say that crossing the Drake Passage is kind of a rite of passage as well. It gives you an opportunity to prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually for what is to come as you head to the southern continent.
For those of you who may have a little apprehension, as Solon said, for a lot of people it is a rite of passage and it's something they have to check off their list. For those of you who are worried about it or would rather avoid it, the way Jim and I and the kids experienced Antarctica is we did Quark's Fly and Sail. And they usually incorporate a few of those journeys a year. And basically what it allowed us to do, we had to choose that because we had a time constraint. So we were only able to do 11 days. So unfortunately we missed Falkland and South Georgia. So if you want to do that whole itinerary that Solon talked about, it will be inevitable that you will get to experience the Drake Passage. But for us, we flew over it. So you literally take a charter flight, you fly into and onto the peninsula, and then we all boarded the ship there. So for us, it cut off like 4 or 5 days off of the itinerary, which we needed to do because of kids' schedules. But some people choose it because if they are worried about motion sickness or other things, that is an option that we could explore with you as well. Any other questions for those who are on yet. I think that's mostly it.
There was a really great one, Linda, about the Northern Lights, because I think
Yeah.
we forget talking about that, and they are a bucket list item. And so maybe Alex, with his Greenland expertise, can share a little bit about some of our Greenland Northern Lights programs.
Yeah, let's hope my internet connection holds. It seems. Thank you for your patience.
I'll
Yeah.
jump in if.
Yeah, Solon, you can pick up if I cut out. But no, the Northern Lights is a fantastic experience. And trips in September, we do some trips to East Greenland in September. There's kind of an auroral band around the Arctic, which is, you know, just around Iceland and north. And Scoresby Sun's right in that band. And the autumnal equinox is a great time to travel, which is at the end of September. So that's where solar energy is kind of at its height. So I would, recommend. I think we have 2 voyages that are focused on the Northern Lights, and it's like an outer worldly experience. Honestly, it's like nothing you can describe unless you've done some illicit drugs and seen the world in a different way than many of us have. It's unbelievable. I took my 78-year-old father to East Greenland, and he's not a very spiritual guy, but he was just like laying on the deck of the ship. Like, is this real? What's happening here? This is amazing. It's incredible. And it was like one of the craziest things that he's ever experienced.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so again, before we sign off, and we'll thank our speakers, is because these expedition cruises are smaller, some are 120, 130, the Ultramarine is just shy of 200. Obviously, these are bucket list places. So looking into 22 and even into 23 is not far-fetched because there's not a lot of, they're intentionally small passenger count, and the guide to guest ratio is very awesome. So it's kind of a high demand. So please let us know if you want to explore it anymore, and we would love to connect you so that you could meet people like Kara, Solon, and Alex in person and learn more than you are in just a little over an hour. So Kara, Alex, Solon, of course, I always thank you, my friends, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. We could listen to you all evening. We would be in a meditative state for sure, Solon, but it is amazing to hear your stories, you guys. And for everybody on, thank you for joining us tonight. Stay tuned for our next one. You'll get an email notification on what our June travel night is, and my email's there. So shoot me an email if you have more questions or comments. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
This is great.